All right. So here we are. We are beginning. Let me know if you could hear me. Okay. Did everyone get the file that I put up? Just give me a thumbs up that you got the file. And now we're going to begin. Okay. First of all, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your Rosh Hashanah. And now we're preparing for Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is less than a week away. Yom Kippur begins on Sunday night. And there is a lot to talk about Yom Kippur, which we already did last week. And so we're going to move on to the next holiday because between Yom Kippur and Sukkot is only 4 days, which means that we won't have enough time to do this between then and get up to the next class. So we want to be a little bit ahead to give us time to prepare. So as we just celebrated Yom Kippur, we now move on to the next holiday. Now everyone knows about celebrating Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Those are the big ones. Those are ones that now you can find services all over the web and Zoom services. But what about the other half of the holiday, of the high holidays? As a matter of fact, I would venture to say, if I would be allowed to, that you may be better off celebrating the second half of the holidays instead of the first half, because at least they're fun, at least they're enjoyable. Why you want to come to synagogue when you're going to have to fast? You have to be serious. You have to pray all day. At least come to the joyous holiday. Come to the one where you could celebrate and enjoy. So that's the holiday of Sukkot. So it begins on the 15th day of Tishrei on the Hebrew calendar and lasts for 7 days. Or in the diaspora, it lasts for 8 days. And this year, the calendar, it would be from October 2nd all the way to October 9th. The first 2 days of the festival are Yom Tov, during which most forms of work are forbidden. And the next days are intermediate days, during which most forms of work are permissible. And that is referred to as Chol HaMoed. Sukkot has another 2 festivals, Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, which we are going to talk about in next lesson. However, as we are still, we're just a week away from the holiday of Sukkot, so we have to prepare for that as much as we do for Yom Kippur, which is coming up. Now, most Jewish holidays, they celebrate a specific event. So Passover, what does Passover celebrate? So you'll tell me Passover celebrates the fact that they went out of Egypt, the exodus of Egypt. You have Shavuos, that celebrates receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. Then comes the holiday of Sukkot. What is Sukkot? What does that celebrate? So it's actually celebrating a 40-year event. It's celebrating the entire journey of our ancestors during the time that they spent in the desert going to the Holy Land. So during Sukkot, we eat in an outdoor hut, which is called a sukkah, hence the festival Sukkot, sukkah. Now, what is the connection between the sukkah and the hut that we sit in and the holiday that we're celebrating, the journey in the desert? So one way to say it is that it reminds us about the miraculous clouds that protected the Jewish people while they were traveling, the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory that protected the Jewish people while they were traveling in the desert. That is one view, but there's another view, and for those of you who joined my Talmud, Raymond, you'll probably remember this. My Talmud class, we learned both of these views in our Talmud when we learned the tractate of Sukkah. The other view is no, it is not that they it's not that we're commemorating the clouds of glory, but actually they had these huts that they referred to as Sukkot. They were temporary sukkahs, and that's how they lived. And it's to remind us to be grateful for our permanent, comfortable homes that we have, as they lived in these huts for many years. Now, although all the festivals are joyous, nevertheless, when it comes to the holiday of Sukkot, it's particularly joyous. The Torah says that when it comes to the festival of Sukkot, Vayita ach sameach, you shall be only joyous, specifically on the festival of Sukkot. And in our prayers, when we refer to the holidays, so you have, for example, we say the Passover, we call Passover, Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our redemption. But, and when it comes to the holiday of Shavuos, it refers to the holiday of Shavuot as Zman Matan Taratenu, the time of the giving of our Torah. How is it referred to as the holiday of Sukkot in our prayers? Do you know how it's referred to? It's referred to as Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. In other words, even in our prayers, we say the whole essence of the holiday is that it should be a joyous holiday, rejoicing. What is so joyous about sitting out in huts? Now, if you live in Florida, okay, this is when the weather actually starts to get nice after a very a summer that rains every day. So you hope that when it comes October time, maybe the rain is starting to settle down a little bit. It's starting to get past the season of hurricanes and all that stuff. And then you say, okay, October time, all right, hopefully we could start sitting outside. But everywhere else, October, that's the time you want to go back inside. That's when it's getting cold. I remember times growing up in Chicago when it was actually snow sometimes in the sukkah. So what is so joyous about this? So there's a few things that is very joyous, and also its association with the other holidays. Historically, we had the holiday of Yom Kippur, and we talked about it last week, that Yom Kippur is the day that God atoned our sins. But the original sin that he atoned for was the sin of the golden calf. So now what happens? God atones for the sin of the golden calf. 4 days later, everything is cleaned up. Moses says you're forgiven. They have a day to rest up. And then they have celebration. We're forgiven. What greater thing is there than knowing that you're forgiven? So it's associated with the fact that you're forgiven from everything that you did, from all the sins that you, so to speak, got rid of when it came the holiday of Yom Kippur. Another point is that every year on Yom Kippur, God atones our sins and grants us a year of goodness. And so we celebrate this every year. In other words, it's not only about what happened then, but it's also the fact that God forgives our sins every year and God grants us a good year. And so we celebrate the fact after Yom Kippur that God is now granting us a good year. And this is the moment where God is taking us and embracing us after those serious times. This intense connection that we forge with God in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, this burst forth, this joy, which is revealed during the day of Sukkot, this intense connection that we have with God, which comes revealed. It says that everything that happened, it says, Tiku b'chodesh shofar, blow in the month, in the new beginning of the month, blow the shofar, b'kesel yom chagenu, where it's hidden for the time of our festival. Because when you're blowing the shofar, the time of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, that's a serious time. But then over there, the joy is hidden. It's a joyous time, but it's in a more hidden way because it's joy that comes together with seriousness. When it comes to the festival of Sukkot, it's Yom Chagenu. Now the joy could already be expressed. So another related point is the fact that Sukkot is also the time of the gathering. It's a time that everything comes in, right? October time is a time where the harvest is done, the gathering time comes in, the fall, the autumn, and it's when the Jews in Israel gather their harvest for the indoor storage. As someone told me that they always used to get the corn stalks for that they're able to use for schach or sukkah from this time. So maybe other people use it for other holidays or for other things, but we use it for that. When we bring in a bountiful harvest, it's also easy to grow haughty and forget where this comes from. And so Sukkot reminds us to be humble and thank God for his generosity and thank him through humility, which is expressed on the holiday of Sukkot. So that is the general outline of what the holiday of Sukkot is about. Now let's talk about how do we prepare for Sukkot. So the Medrash tells us that the first 14 days of the year, Jews do not sin. Why? So the first 10 days, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you're busy doing tshuva, you're busy repenting. So you're not going to sin if you're busy repenting. Then you have another 4 days that you have to prepare for the holiday of Sukkot, that you're so busy with mitzvahs. There's such extensive preparation that has to happen for the festival that you don't have time to sin. What kind of things you have to do for the festival? So there's two main mitzvahs that you have to prepare for on the holiday of Sukkot. The first one is that you have to build a sukkah, hence the name Sukkot, whatever, however you want to say it, Sukkot, comes from the word sukkah, building a sukkah. What is a sukkah? A sukkah is an outdoor hut. Now, it could be made of any material that can withstand the ordinary wind. And Raymond, you'll know this as we study this in Tractate Sukkah over and over again. The walls can be made of anything as long as it can stand an ordinary wind. Okay, so if it's knocked down by a hurricane, that's okay. We're talking about an ordinary wind. So it has to be strong enough for that. Now, the roof is really the main part of the sukkah. That is where the focal part of the expression of what the sukkah really is. The sukkah is the roof, which is called the schach. Schach means the cover of the sukkah. And over there are three general rules of how the schach needs to be, and it is with these, and it's with these that we make up what the schach could come from. Number one, the schach has to go from the ground. You cannot take something that comes from an animal. You cannot take something that is man-made. It needs to be something that grows from the ground. Number two, it has to be cut from the ground. So you can't just sit under a tree and say, well, the tree goes from the ground. It has to be actually cut off from the ground and from the tree. And number three, once it is cut off, it cannot have been transformed into a vessel of any sort. So you can't take, say, a wooden bowl and use that because it's already been transformed into something for use of something else. So it has to be something that is very organic and not been used for anything else. The sukkah, so again, it has to be from the ground, it has to be cut from the ground, and it has to be organic and not been turned into anything else. The sukkah has to be directly under the sky rather than a tree or an underhang, or it can't be inside a house, of course. And there needs to be enough schach to cover it so that the sukkah has more shade than sunlight. A lot of people like to make schach light enough for the stars to be visible, and there are those that have that custom. Some are not that careful about it, like in Chabad, we're not that careful that the stars should be visible, but it could be a little bit thick, but as long as the rain can get through. There has to be a little bit of rain that can get through. You can use bamboo branches. It's a very popular thing that people like to use because it lasts and it can be used from year to year. You can use palm fronds. A lot of people like to use evergreens because they have a good smell. Whatever it is, you don't want to use something that does not smell good or something that would cause you to want to go out of the sukkah, but those are the basic things to use for the covering of the sukkah. So many people, before that, what is the other makeup of the sukkah? It has to have at least 2.5 walls. It can be built in the yard, a balcony, it can be built anywhere. But if it's, let's say you could conveniently do like we do here at Chabad, you could use a wall from a house as long as it's not under the roof of the home. So if it's outside, you can use that. It has to have at least 2.5 walls. So have 2 full walls and 1 bed. Better if it has at least 3 walls. And many people have the custom to beautify the sukkah with art, with draperies, with lights, with decorative ornaments. All that stuff is fine. The Chabad custom is not to leave it bare, as the thinking is that the mitzvah itself is the most potent beautifier of the sukkah, but it all goes by preference. As long as you follow the basic guidelines, has to be strong enough to hold an ordinary wind, has to have 2.5 walls, has to have a covering that is cut from the ground, it comes from the ground, cut from the ground, not used for any other purpose, and there has to have more shade than sun. And with that being said, it's really not that good, not that difficult to make a sukkah. You could really make it out of anything. In Gainesville, where there's the University of Florida, they have every year a challenge for the architect school to make sukkahs, and they make it on campus. They make sukkahs. So it's really not that difficult, and I would encourage people to make sukkahs. Nowadays, you go to the sukkah center, and there's other sukkah or businesses that actually send you prefab sukkahs, and most of them are really easy to put up. Anyway, so if you're able to make a sukkah, that's a fantastic thing. It's really not that difficult. Only for me, it's difficult. That's why I have to hire a bunch of guys to do it. But that's just because we have a very large sukkah. But in general, you can make a small sukkah. It has to be at least 7 feet by 7 feet. That's it. That's not big at all. Next, then that is the first central mitzvah of the holiday of Sukkot, is the sukkah. The next central mitzvah is the 4 species. The 4 species is to gather vegetation and to make it part of, and to shake those species. Again, I just want to remind you that I did post a booklet that you can use that has a lot of these things. Sorry that we do not have a... One second. No, that's... okay, there's not much in there, actually. Yeah, I don't have a, what do you call it, a PowerPoint today. So we'll just continue on talking. All right, let's get back to it. Sorry. Wait up. Okay. Next. A sukkah. Okay, next, we're talking about the 4 species. The Torah says as follows: and take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of a beautiful tree, date palm fronds, a branch of a braided tree, and willows of a brook, and you shall rejoice before God, your God, for 7 days. So what does it say? You have to take 4 species. The first one is a date palm. The first one is a beautiful fruit. The next one is date palm. The next one is a braided tree, which is a myrtle. And the next one is a willow of a brook known as a rava, a willow branch. Now we know what these are, not only from the verse itself, but from Moses teaching us what these things are. So the esrog is what's today called a citron, and it is basically a very, very beautiful version of a lemon. It grows in warm climates such as Israel and Italy. The best place to get it is from Italy, and perhaps the very first place of having classy items come from Italy was when Moses arranged that his esrog came from Italy. According to tradition, that's where Moses got his esrog from. The esrog should be complete with no holes or missing sections or to be kosher. The esrog, some of them come with what's called a pitum, which is a little puffy thing on top. It's like a little bulbous stem on top. It has to remain intact for the esrog to be kosher. The esrog typically comes originally green, and then it gets yellow over time. You want it to be preferably yellow, but if it's green, it's still kosher as long as it's not a dark green. The Torah calls the esrog a beautiful fruit. Therefore, it's good to look through and to find a good esrog. Now, I understand that over here you don't have many options except for what we provide for you at Chabad. But if you come first come, first serve, you could pick out your esrog as you like. The lulav is a branch of a palm tree, has many layers of branches, and this is the central stem, which is all the way on top. Now, anyone that lives in Florida, you see palm trees all the time, so you know that there's always one branch that sticks out on top. That is the one that's used for the lulav, not the ones that open. It's the one that's closed. Lulav should stand right rather than bent forward or left, and the branches need to hug the stem. The next one is called a myrtle, which, as we said, is called a woven branch, and you want at least 51% of that having leaves, and it's a very, very good smelling branch. And finally, the willow. The willow is semi easy to find, but you could buy willow, and the best willow to find are ones that have red stems to them, which is something that certain willows carry, red stems. So the four species can be purchased anytime between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. You want to bind them, you want to have them prepared, best to have them prepared before Sukkot. On Erev Sukkot, some people put a myrtle or willow holder. The Chabad way is to tie it up. We have a special way of doing it. But however you do it, you want it to be tied, because the mitzvah is that they should be tied together. Of course, you can't tie the esrog, but the lulav, the willow, and the hadas and the myrtle should all be tied together. The lulav should have at least one ring, better two rings, on the actual stem of the lulav itself. So, and then the Chabad custom is to have three going around all of the species together. And that is basically how it's made. Now, as we'll soon see, this year we do not use the lulav on the first day because it is Shabbos. We'll get to that soon. Candle lighting. As always, as every holiday, we light candles for the holiday. And in this case, if you're lighting candles by the sukkah, you may want to light inside. If you're concerned about wind or space or safety precautions, then you can light them inside. You want to light them before sunset. And in this case, although normally you're allowed to light candles on Yantif, however, this year it's Shabbos, and you'll make the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, lahadik ner shel Shabbat v'shel Yom Tov. Both, and then of course this to the blessing Shachianu as well. Even when praying at home, find a suitable location and do pray. We begin, as we did on Rosh Hashanah, with the second half, beginning by the Lichadodi, which is in the Siddur, it would be on page 156, the Kabbalat Shabbat, but the abridged version, which starts later on Mizmar LeDavid. Mizmar LeDavid, that's where you begin when it falls out on a holiday, and then you sing the Lichadodi in order to bring at least some of the Shabbat spirit into the prayers, even though it's a festival, but we have to have the Shabbat spirit as well. And then you continue on. When it comes to the Amida, if anybody has the Chabad Siddur that we use, the blue one on page 331, there is a special Amida for festivals where you see it's split up according to Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And so you say the special Amida for the festivals, not the one that's typical for Shabbat. The dinner in the sukkah, beginning the first night, all meals shall be done in the sukkah, and the snacks and drinks may be halachically eaten at home, but it's preferable to eat as much as you can inside the sukkah. If you want to take a snack, it's appropriate to do it in the sukkah. Many people sleep in the sukkah. This is not the Chabad custom. It's a little bit beyond the scope of why, but we do not sleep in the sukkah. in Florida may be particularly uncomfortable, especially with a lot of bugs. But nevertheless, you shall try to eat in the sukkah as much as possible. Before eating or drinking in the sukkah, we recite the blessing for specific food, and then you say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'shev b'sukkah, which means your blessed God who commanded us to sit in the sukkah. And many people have the custom to look up at the schach when making this blessing. This is recited on the first night during Kiddush. If you're reciting Kiddush, at the end you make the blessing Leche Basukkah. The mitzvah of Sukkah can be fulfilled while visiting another Sukkah, and therefore I invite anyone who wants to be in a Sukkah. If you don't have your own, you're welcome to come to Chabad anytime and use our Sukkah. It is open, and you could just walk right in and use the Sukkah anytime that you wish if you want to make a blessing in the Sukkah. It is permissible to leave the sukkah to enter your home if you experience significant discomfort in the sukkah, the degree of the discomfort that would drive you from your home. For example, if there's rain or stench or mosquito infestation. But in general, we try to eat in the sukkah as much as possible. It is, by the way, binding for men. It is optional for women because it's considered a mitzvah, which is a time binding mitzvah. And nevertheless, women are encouraged to eat in the sukkah as well. We learned earlier that sukkah commemorates our ancestors' journey across the desert. Among the reasons that we celebrate their journey at this time, in addition to the reasons that outlined earlier, is the fact that it's the beginning of the rain season in Israel. And if you're to take your meals outdoor when it's dry and comfortable, then you say you're doing it for comfort. But when you're going into the sukkah, when it's not comfortable, it demonstrates that we're doing it exclusively for the mitzvah. Now, as I said, you may argue that that's not the case for Florida, but nevertheless, we follow the way it is in Israel. The spring and the summer, when the days are long and the sun is strong, it bespeaks a time for divine revelation. The dark, cold days of winter is a time of divine concealment. So we bring our festive celebrations outside at this time of year, and it's a way of bringing light and revelation of the Torah into the world, which God is becoming more concealed. And in other words, the sukkah is bringing warmth and inspiration to Judaism, to a world that's growing increasingly spiritually dark and more melancholy in the winter spirit, when things are not as bright, if you will, as the summer days are. As every holiday, we always begin our festive meal on Yantif with Kiddush, which is a special Kiddush recited for the holidays. We recite the Shechianu on the first nights of Sukkot, and also make the blessing on the Sukkah. We wash our hands as we do for Challah and all that kind of stuff, just like any other holiday. So that's as far as the Sukkah goes and the Lulav goes. Now there's other aspects to the holiday that we're going to talk about now. The next aspect of the holiday is something called Ushpizin. Some of you may have seen the famous movie Ushpizin, the Israeli movie. The word Ushpizin means guests. Now, there's a mitzvah to invite in many guests in the Sukkah, as it is with every holiday. But tradition has it, Jewish mysticism teaches us that there are guests that visit our sukkah, their spirit, their souls visit our sukkah on the festival of Sukkot. They are Avram, the first night, Yitzchak, the second night, Yaakov, the third night, Moshe, the fourth, Aaron, Joseph, and King David. They all come each day, but each one has their night, and that is called Ushpizin. The Chabad tradition as well is that we believe that all the Chabad Rebbe's spirit come as well, beginning with the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek, and all the other Chabad Rebbes. They visit Sukkot rather than other Jewish festivals for several reasons. And one of them is because since we're eating outdoor, to bring holiness to the outside, so they fortify the spiritual strength and the task that it requires in order for us to fulfill this that is bestowed upon us. In many Jewish homes, they recite prayers of greeting to greet in the Ushpizin, to tell them that you share words of Torah about that individual. So on the first night, share something about Abraham, the second night about Isaac, and so on and so forth. So that is the next aspect of Sukkot, the aspect of the Ushpizin. The next thing that another aspect of the holiday, another very formidable part of the holiday, is what's called Simchat Beis Hashu'eva, the joy of the drawing of the water. Sukkot is a particularly joyous holiday, as we mentioned earlier. And one of the joyous features of this holiday is the joy of the drawing of the water. What is the joy of the drawing of the water? So in ancient Jewish temple, the Kohanim would pour daily wine libations onto the altar. On Sukkot, they would also pour a water libation. The libation was poured shortly after sunrise, but the occasion was so joyous that the celebrations would last all night. On the Chol Hamoed nights, the temple courtyard was lit up so brilliantly that the entire city of Jerusalem was illuminated. Throughout the nights, the sages and leaders would dance in the temple. The people would clap and sing. There was a special place for men and for women to partake in the celebrations. The Levites would play music, and the prophets would say prophecy, and deep secrets of the Torah were revealed during that time. It was considered a very, very joyous time during the time of the drawing of the water all night. Before sunrise, the Levites would sound the trumpets. The people would parade in the mountain, the Shiloh well, where they would draw the water, and then they would parade back to the temple. On the steps leading to the sanctuary, the Levites would blow trumpets, the Kohanim would pour the libations, and then they would disperse. And some of the things that the Talmud says, it says that the light from the joy was so great that a woman on the other side of Jerusalem that came about from the joy of the Simchas Beis Hashu'eva. That's how bright it was in the middle of the night. Other things that say, some of the great sages, Rabbi Yishmael who would juggle cups of wine. Another sage says would juggle fire. Another one would juggle knives. You see the sages in such an incredible expression of joy. King David, it says, would dance a whole night as a king. So although we cannot pour libations today, the Lubavitcher Rebbe initiated a campaign to still dance and celebrate all the days of Sukkot. In many communities, largely nightly celebrations are organized during Sukkot to dance in the street. I remember as a young boy, I grew up in Chicago, which was relatively a smaller community compared to some other ones, and compared to New York or whatever, but they wanted to always keep this tradition of dancing in the street. So there was a man there. So each night the task was given to someone else, and typically there wasn't much street dancing. And there was a man there who lived behind my alley. Over there, there's alleyways. And whenever it was his night, whenever he would host it, in other words, in his home, he would always go out in the street and start dancing. And year after year, as if on cue, the neighbor would come out and complain that there's too much noise in the street. And year after year, the police would come, and this was the story every year. Finally, we said, we're going to do it right. And he said he's going to do it right. And he said, let's get this going. He arranged permits from the city. And every year since then, they bring singers, music, every single night. Of course, in Crown Heights, they do it. Many other places, they do it. They have singing and dancing in the streets every single night of Sukkot. And so this is something that we do today as part of a remembrance of the Holy Temple and to keep this tradition of bringing about the joy of the Holy Temple. Now, what is the idea of the water and why such celebration? So the two libations, water and wine, represent two ways of serving God. Wine has a wonderful aroma and flavor, but water is not. Water has no flavor at all, but it's an expression of life. Water is about life. means serving God with a highly enjoyable, spiritually satisfying endeavor. Yet whatever fulfillment we derive from our relationship with God is finite. Even if we have enjoyment out of it, it's finite. But when it comes to water, water represents entirety, self-nullification to God, connecting to God in a way that's beyond flavor, so to speak, connecting to God in a way that we're not being contained or controlled by any feel or emotions connected to that. And being that we have just celebrated the festival of Yom Kippur, where God has forgiven all our sins, it's represented through the water, the purity of the soul that expresses itself during this special time, during this special celebration. We learned earlier and as we learned about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, that you enter the Holy of Holies, so to speak, on this day. So this pure, private, intimate moment, and Sukkot is being celebrated. That's the idea of the water. The water is the bond that we have with God that is not expressed in any way, in any flavor, in any feeling, but it's something that's beyond that. It's very, very deep connection, profound joy that cannot sit still. And that brings us to singing and dancing this intense celebration, celebratory moment that we have with God. Then, so that is the Simchat Pei Teshuvah, the celebration. Now let's go back for a moment to the 4 species, because we talked about taking them, but we didn't talk about how you take them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this year is Shabbat, the first day of Sukkot, so we do not take the 4 species, just like we don't blow the shofar on Shabbat. So you begin taking it on Sunday. The best time to do so is early in the morning. The best place to do it is inside the sukkah. You make a blessing. Baruch, you hold up the lulav upright with the stem facing you. You say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu tzatav v'tzivanu al netilat lulav. That God has commanded us to take the lulav. We bless the lulav, which stands out more than all the other ones and represents the important connection of Torah study that we have, as we'll soon see in a moment. We lift the esrog in the left hand. You hold them together. You hold them up. You put them together, and you say the blessing Shechiyanu. If it's the first time, that would be the Sunday, meaning next Sunday. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Shechiyanu v'kimanu v'ganu zman hazeh, and then you shake it. After blessing and on the lulav, you hold the lulav in your right hand, the esrog in your left hand, and you shake it in all different directions. 3 times to the right, 3 times to and fro to the left, 3 times forward, 3 times up, 3 times down, and then 3 times behind you, with the last time twisting a little bit so you'll be able to get all the way around. And that is the proper way to shake the lulav. Now, what is the idea of the shaking of the lulav in this way? It's our way of proclaiming that we received a positive decree for a good year. We're victorious, just like armies, when they march after a victory, they hold up their swords up high. We too are holding up our lulav to celebrate the victory and judgment. That's one explanation given. Among the other reasons for joy is that it falls during the inherent gathering of the harvest. And when we gather in plentiful crop, we are in danger of growing boastful in joy. So we want to show our gratitude to God. So therefore we take some of the crops and make a blessing over it, showing gratitude to God. Also, Sukkot celebrates the wondrous gift that God gave our ancestors when he took them from the uninhabitable and settled them in the land of Israel. So to celebrate that, we take 4 of the most plentiful species in Israel, which represent which are pleasant in appearance and in fragrance. And so you want to keep them fresh for 7 days and hold them high, showing gratitude to God for giving us this holy land. The 4 species teach us, in addition, that to serve God, we are a complete being. The esrog represents the heart. The lulav represents the spine. The myrtle represents the eyes. The shape of the leaves are like little eyes. And the willow represents lips. And this message of this mitzvah that we have to be complete in all aspects, everything that we have, in our heart, in our spine to stand upright, in our eyes, be careful what we see, and in our lips, be careful what we say. Each of these carry a different message of unity. The esrog has a delicious taste and a pleasant aroma, represents a Jew who studies Torah and has good deeds. The aroma represents Torah study, and the taste represents good deeds. The date palm has a delicious taste. Okay, it's referring to the dates, not the palm itself, but the dates have delicious taste, but generally no aroma in dates, and that represents a Jew who studies Torah but lacks good deeds. The myrtle, the hadas, is a very pleasant aroma. It's used other times as well. Many people make blessings on the aroma of the hadas and the myrtle before Shabbos, for example, and other times. The myrtle represents a Jew who has many good deeds but doesn't study Torah. That's what the good aroma represents, doing many, many good deeds. And finally, the willow has neither an aroma or a taste, and that represents a Jew who has neither. But what do? We take all these different types of Jews and we bring them together. It's the gathering. The holiday of ingathering doesn't only mean the ingathering of harvest. It also means a gathering of people, bringing together people, celebrating together as a people. That is what Sukkot is all about, the celebration together. And that's represented through the different species that are bringing together. So by instructing us to bundle them together, God is telling us that when we come together, God is elevated and he atones for our sins. And when we are complete, when we're missing even one type of Jew, then everything is lacking. Even if it's not the esrog Jew, the complete Jew, even if it's the willow Jew, the one who has no fragrance, no taste, no smell, still that they have to be part of everything that we do. And this is also what we talked earlier about Simchat Beitz HaShoeva, the joy of celebrating the drawing of the water is also about unity. It's about coming together, celebrating together. The sukkah also represents unity. I mean, sitting together under one roof, under one mitzvah, being surrounded by the same mitzvah is also a representation of unity. And so this is a holiday of unity. So when we talk about the holiday of ingathering, it doesn't just mean gathering fruits and vegetables. It means gathering each other, coming together. Because what happens after we're atoned? As a family, the best thing to do is to come together. You have a difficult time, you come together, you work out your issues, and now you atone for each other. Just like on Yom Kippur, you have to forgive each other. Now, what do you want to do as a family? You're able to deal with those issues, and then you go and you celebrate. You have a party, you celebrate together. Let's talk a little bit about the prayers that we do on Sukkot. The morning service is just like any Shabbos, beginning on page 101, 108. Except for when it comes to Amidah, then you do the Amidah of the festivals. But we add in every day of Sukkot, we add in the Hallel. Hallel on page 307 in our Siddur is the prayer of praise. And this is recited on Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, as well as on Rosh Chodesh, is the Hallel. And this is recited every day. Every day is a miracle. We sing to God praises for the miracles that we have each and every day. It's important to remember that when we praise God, it deepens our connection with him. When we sing the Hallel as a community, it's very uplifting, and that's a beautiful thing to do. Now, during Hallel, we take the lulav and we shake the lulav. In other words, aside for shaking the lulav in the morning, we also take the species during the Hallel celebration, and this is what it's called, Hoshinus. Now, there's a few aspects to this. Number one, we shake the Hallel. We shake the lulav during Hallel in different places, as indicated in the Siddur. Like when you say Ana Hashem Oshiana, you shake the lulav. After Hallel, there is an additional prayer that is recited. It's not recited on Shabbos. And that is called the Hoshinus. Hoshinus is an ancient tradition that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down from Mount Sinai. In other words, it's not clearly written in the Torah, but it was taught from Moses. And it goes all the way back to then. And it's there to enhance the joy of Sukkot. In the temple, the way they did it was the Jews would lean a very tall willow branch against the altar and parade around the altar each day of Sukkot while sounding the trumpet and praying for divine salvation. Hoshinus means salvation. After the temple was destroyed, our sages ordained that Jews parade around the central Torah reading, nor bima, by their synagogue each day of Sukkot while holding the four species in our hand to commemorate what was done inside the Holy Temple this tradition of the Hoshanas. In the synagogue setting, the Torah is removed from the ark, and at this point, held at the bima, the congregation holds the four species and parades around. The chazan says the words Hoshayna Laman Chalikeinu Hoshayna, and he's one person is designated as a leader, and everyone repeats after him. Shoshana Laman Chabareinu Hoshayna is actually a very, very beautiful part of the service that unfortunately many people don't get to experience because it's the reality. It's the reality of the twice a year Jew. What can I say? The Torah reading is done. Torah reading is done in the synagogue setting as every holiday, and there are certain it's split up by certain readings from the portion of Pinchas, which basically talks about the offerings that were brought every day in the temple. That's what we read, the offerings that were brought each day. After the Torah reading, we pray Musaf on the first day of Sukkot, and on the second day of Sukkot, if it falls on Shabbos, we add some additions there, but still there's a special Sukkot, which is a special Musaf for the holidays. And as we do on the other festivals, there's Birchat Kohanim, there's priestly blessing. For those of you who are here on Rosh Hashanah, you saw us doing the priestly blessing. That is done every holiday, including Sukkot. The second day of Sukkot, we repeat everything that you had the first day. You light candles except after nightfall because Shabbos. You want to do it after Shabbos, and then you can continue on. In the Kiddush, you add in the Havdalah, which is an additional part, as you'll see inside the Kiddush. Chol Hamoed is an intermediate part of Sukkot, which is very similar to all the other days, all the other festival days. You shake the lulav all the days, all the intermediate days of Sukkot. You recite Hallel all the intermediate days of Sukkot. You don't say the Shabbos davening as you do, but still you add the Hallel, you do the holiday Musaf, and typically the prayers are very similar to the first 2 days of Yantif on Chol Hamoed as they are on the other days. You circle the bima as you did the other days. You shake the lulav as you did the other days, and that is done for Chol Hamoed for the next 5 days of the festival. And this goes until the 7th day of Sukkot, which is called Hoshayna Rabbah, the Great Hoshayna. The last day of Sukkot is called Hoshayna Rabbah. Judaism teaches that the final judgment related to rainfall during the coming year is made on this day. And for this reason, there are several traditions associated specifically with the day of Hoshayna Rabbah. Number 1, before Hoshayna Rabbah, we collect or purchase 5 willow branches. The other ones we had 2 in our lulav. There are 5 branches that we hold. These are not taken from the lulav. These are separate ones. And what do you do? We usually collect them if people need. We bring them in. We have them available too. Many have the custom of reading Deuteronomy on the eve of Hoshayna Rabbah and Psalms after nightfall, the entire Psalms, and there are special additions in the Psalms, special prayers that are added after each book of Psalms in Hoshayna Rabbah, which can be found inside the prayer book, inside the Tehillim, the book of Psalms on the eve of Hoshayna Rabbah. Many people stay up entire night. Some people eat apples and honey on Hoshayna Rabbah. There are a lot of things that are very similar to Rosh Hashanah because of the judgment, because it's considered the conclusion of the judgment day. So there are many similarities that go with it. After Hallel, another example we talked about before Yom Kippur, the idea of giving a piece of honey cake called lekach. So the Rebbe used to distribute lekach on Hoshayna Rabbah to those who did not receive on the day before Yom Kippur. So it's sort of like the climax of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, which is sort of intertwined with the holiday of Sukkot at the same time. Now, we talked about the idea of a shyness, which in the time of the temple was taking a willow and surrounding the bima, and we do this today. When it comes to Shana Rabbah, we don't circle it one time, we circle 7 times the bima each time, saying all the verses that we said each day. We do that each time, and then that would be 6 plus the 7th time. We go around the bima each time, reciting all of these special prayers. After the 7th paragraph, we continue on, and then there's a long list of special prayers beseeching God for a year of plenty, a year of rainfall, and we recite as many things as you can. It's a very, very long. You can find it in the Siddur. And each family member at the end takes a willow, and you strike it on the ground 5 times. And this is the final act of the Hoshana Rabbah prayer, taking those willows, and you bang those hard on the ground. It is customary to store the willows or the lulav in place until the coming Passover, where you burn it together with the chametz. But the hashanas, and as well as the arava, the myrtle, the willow which you banged on the floor, you should do that. What is the reason for it? It is because we are getting rid of any judgment that is associated with the holiday, because the number 5 it represents the 5 levels of judgment, and so by banging it on the floor, we're getting rid of those levels of judgment connected to the holiday. It's customary to enjoy a special meal on the sukkah on this day. We recite L'David Hashem Ori, which is the Psalm number 27. We recite it through Hoshana Rabbah, and we also dip challah in honey all the way through Hoshana Rabbah. And then we conclude it then. Some people eat what's known as kreplach on Hoshana Rabbah, which is also done on the day before Yom Kippur. Kreplach is meat that is covered in a dough, and other things that are traditional to eat, especially for Hoshana Rabbah, the day of the culmination of judgment. So, joyful occasions are celebrated with family and friends. The more joyous the occasion, the larger the attendance. This year, however, some of us are challenged that we have to celebrate the happiest days of the Jewish calendar, surrounded only by our very close family, and for some, even not that. Some might be completely alone. It's very difficult. Judaism teaches that challenges are opportunities, and before God presents us with a challenge, He fortifies us with the ability to overcome it. This year, more than ever, God will be on our side to rejoice on Sukkot. We might not be in the company of others, but we'll be in God's company, who will suffuse our heart with gladness and souls of joy. If we believe fervently and we visualize God is on our side, we'll be able to meet this challenge with courage and enjoy a happy and joyous Sukkot. If anybody needs anything for the holiday of Sukkot, if you want to order a set of lulav and esrog, you can do that online. We have them available now. If you want some links of where you can get a prefab sukkah to order, I can give you that as well. And we could assist you with anything possible. We're working on getting a mobile sukkah that will be able to drive around to allow people to celebrate the holiday, even if they have to be at home. With that, I wish you all a wonderful, happy Sukkot, although we're still before the holiday of Yom Kippur. I wish you a wonderful rest of the new year, and may this be a year that we should be able to celebrate together in person with the ultimate celebration in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and to see true celebrations, as it says regarding the Simchas Pesach Shueva. It says, whoever has never seen the joy of the Simchas Pesach Shueva in the Holy Temple has never seen true joy in their lifetime. So we hope and pray we'll be able to see this true joy and be able to truly celebrate. May it be speedily in our days. Amen.